You know, there's a lot of rappers with alter egos just to give themselves a different identity, right? Like the whole Wu-Tang Clan, Raekwon, the Chef, Ghostface Killer, he Tony Starks, Method Man, call him Johnny Blaze, Eminem, Slim Shady, Nas, Escobar, Jay-Z, Young Hov. The list goes on. But Shock G, aka Humpty Hump, is probably the most famous one of them all, though. You know, it was three rappers. It was three rappers in the beginning of the 90s that helped hip hop cross over into the mainstream pop world, right? Get into the endorsements in the business world. Now, those three rappers, Hammer, Vanilla Ice, and Shock G, Humpty from Digital Underground. Digital Underground shows used to be wow. Y'all thought Luke and the Two Live Crew shows were crazy. Digital Underground has some wild stuff on stage too. And Shock is probably one of the most underrated producers of all time too. Don't forget that. His beats, his production, his beats he was making, them Digital Underground albums, man, it was like a mixture of jazz, blues, funk, rock, bunch of other stuff all mixed in it, man, and they sound. And then they give you that kind of high energy rap. They can do the party rap, the funny comedian type of rap, and Digital, they used to give you that political hip hop too. And the Humpty Dance, the song has been sampled by over 50 artists. And you know what else about Shock G that's very important? If it wasn't for Shock G, we probably would have never heard of the late, great Tupac Shakur. He introduced Tupac to the world and launched his career. People don't give him credit for that. They don't give him credit for that. He helped Tupac. Shock G, talented. Look, trained musician, can play a lot of instruments. He can draw, paint, always giving back to the community. And some people close to Shock say Shock basically gave all his fortunes away. He was a giving person. He always helped people. You know what? Let's get into Shock G's story, right? Now, Shock G, birth name, right, is Gregory Jacobs. He was born on August 25th, 1963 in Brooklyn, New York. And his mom named him Gregory because she had a crush on legendary tap dancer Gregory Hines. Now, growing up, his family moved to upstate New York. And ever since he was about 5 years old, he fell in love with music. His parents would let him entertain family and friends by singing Motown songs, Stevie Wonder, and a bunch of other artists and stuff. Now, after that, around the age of 8 years old, they ended up moving to Tampa, Florida, after his father got a job promotion. And they moved to an interracial experimental neighborhood, which was one of the first in the United States at the time, where they brought in families of every different race. Now in Tampa, Florida, right, he stayed in a country area in Florida where he used to swim in the river and lakes. He said he would catch snakes and alligators with his bare hands, just doing stuff that country kids do, right? But also around that time, that's when he really started to take music serious. Around the age of 11 years old, and him and his friends had formed a band called the Norwood Specials, which was named after their street where they lived in Tampa. And Shock G was the drummer. He played the drums, and they would do songs by artists like Sly and the Family Stone, Herbie Hancock, and Headhunters, right? Now, when the first band didn't work out, he would form another band. And now this band was called Parliament 2. And they would do a bunch of George Clinton and the P-Funk sound type of music, right? And him and his band, they did end up winning the most talented trophy at the school talent show. But then his parents ended up getting divorced. And Shock ended up moving back to New York with his mom and his little brother. And once he got back to New York, he saw how big hip hop was out there at that time. All the kids was doing it. The break dancing, the rapping, the graffiti and everything. And he wanted to be part of that movement. So that's when he got rid of his drum set. He used to play drums. And he brought his first 2 turntables and a mixer. Now, his original rap name was called MC Starchild. But some of his friends suggested he change it though. And that's when he came up with the name Shock G. And he started rapping and DJing for other rappers in the neighborhood. After that, he moved back to Tampa, Florida after his father ended up winning custody, and he ended up meeting some friends there who were also from the East Coast that loved hip hop at that time too. But see, in Florida, hip hop wasn't really famous like that yet. This was like 1979 when he moved back to Florida from New York. It was hard to find hip hop at the music stores, so they just ended up forming a crew, and they called themselves the Master Blasters, which was a mobile DJ crew of 3 MCs and 2 DJs. And later on, they would change the name Master Blasters to the 4 Horsemen, then to the Big Chill Factor. But anyway, when they were the Master Blasters, right, they would throw parties outside in the jams and out there in the parks in Florida, Tampa, Florida, just like they was doing in New York at the time. And Shock G and the Master Blasters became so popular that Shock G ended up becoming one of the youngest on-air DJs in the state of Florida at the time. It was a program director for an R&B station who saw Shock G. He saw Shock G rock the whole party, had the party rocking. And when he saw that, that program director offered Shock a job at his radio station. But see, the radio station job, it didn't last long because he got fired. Shock got fired for playing George Clinton's song, Not Just Knee Deep, which is 15 minutes long. He played that song in a 4-minute time slot. So they fired him. Now, 18 years old and fired from the radio station, that's when Shock graduated from school and he went to study music theory at Hillsborough Community College. He just wanted to learn more info on music theory and the piano because he had fell in love with the piano at that time. And once he got out of college, him and his girlfriend at the time decided to move to California because there wasn't any music outlets in Florida at the time, man. No opportunities or whatever. And plus him and his father kept bumping heads. So him and his girlfriend left. He ended up getting a job playing piano for this funk band. It was called Onyx. And Shock, he quit that band because he said the leader of the band really thought he was Prince. He was acting too much like Prince. Now, when that didn't work out, Shock moved to Oakland and he got a job as a salesman in a record store. And that's when he ended up meeting Chop Master Jay, who at the time had a lot of connects in the music industry. So they ended up becoming good friends. Chop Master Jay sent some of Shock's music to one of his friends who worked for Macola Records because see, Shock was doing music and he was just doing music to send back home to his friends. But Chop Master Jay heard some of the music and sent it to somebody he knew that worked at a record company. And when that happened, they liked the music that he sent to the label. And that's when Shock had put the hip hop group together called the Spice Regime with Chop Master Jay and Kenny K from back home. And they ended up getting the record deal, Taboo Records, which was distributed through Macola Records also. And they first recorded the Underwater Rhymes with them, but the label didn't really like the group name, the Spice Regime. They didn't like that name because see, the plans for that group was more like Black Panthers type of, it was a Black Panthers type of group he was creating. He wanted to focus more on black social issues like the drugs in the hood, crimes, the cops and stuff like that, because at that time, you know, Shock was more influenced by Public Enemy. But then he realized that they needed to be different to stand out from different rap groups because see, you already had Public Enemy and X-Clan. They was already doing the Black Power thing. They had that lane locked down. Then you had De La Soul, who was doing the hippie type of rap style. So what Shock did, he just decided to just do P-Funk, the George Clinton type of rap stuff. Like Prince, Parliament, Bootsy Collins, they all was his favorite group as a kid, growing up. So he just adapted to that style. Plus Shock was funny, man. Shock was funny and always clowning like a comedian. So he always wanted to add that with his music also too. And that made him different. So they ended up changing the group name to Digital Underground, which represented all the new digital music equipment they was using at the time. And then they added the underground to it because they represented the street side of the hip hop. Now, after that, they ended up meeting Adrian Gregory, who was already he's well known in the music industry for managing the world-class Wrecking Crew with Alonzo Williams, Dr. Dre, and Yella. And he also managed NWA, the DOC, and Miss Chalet. Now, when Shock them, they had met Adrian. Adrian was starting his own record label at the time called TNT Records. And he was looking for some new talent to sign that was different from NWA to his company. And when somebody brought him to hear some of the Digital Underground stuff, he was sold on their sound. He really loved Shock G's talent. And he signed them to his label, TNT Records, right? Now with TNT Records, Digital Underground released the songs Underwater Rhymes and Your Life's a Cartoon that they already had done. They already been done those songs, but they released those songs to the streets in the Bay Area, and it started to generate a buzz in the streets. And they had got word that some major record labels were interested in signing them. So it was Virgin Records that wanted to sign them, Warner Brothers wanted to sign them, and Tommy Boy Records wanted to sign them. But they wanted to hear some more music from them first. But the one that really caught Shock G's attention was Tommy Boy Records, which was based out of New York. And they wanted to see them perform live just to see how they looked on stage. So once they got that info right, now Digital Underground, they needed a DJ for the showcase because see, Kenny K was the DJ at first, but he was going through some stuff. He had some family issues he was going through back home. And that's when Chop Master Jay ended up connecting with one of the hottest DJs in the city at the time, which was DJ Fuse. And they wanted him to be the DJ just for this showcase so they can get this deal with Tommy Boy Records, right? So they ended up doing the first live show, which was opening up for rapper Tone Loc, who had the big hit at the time, Wild Thing. That's a big hit at that time. And after that, they performed. And Tommy Boy Records, they seen him and signed him to the label, which at the time, they also had Queen Latifah, Stetsasonic, Daddy-O and all of them, and De La Soul. And the deal they gave Digital Underground first, it was just a single deal, just to see if that one single that does good before they give them a full album contract. Now, Tommy Boy Records signed them and told them they wanted them to open up for EPMD and Queen Latifah in Germany. And that's when Shock asked DJ Fuse, could he be the permanent DJ for Digital Underground? Now, DJ Fuse told them he would join Digital Underground, but only if they let his boy Money B in the group too, because they had their own group at the time called Raw Fusion. And at the time, Shock G didn't like West Coast rappers because he was used to the East Coast New York rap style. Plus he thought Money B sounded too much like Too Short. But they worked it out, and he let Money B join the group on the strength of DJ Fuse. And the rest is history. Now with DJ Fuse and Money B in the group and signed with Tommy Boy Records, they went straight to work and started recording songs. And on October 18th, 1989, they released their first single titled Do What You Like, which hit number 19 on the Billboard rap charts. But overseas though, the song was a big hit overseas. The first tour, was off of that song. They was all in Europe with that song. Now with the success of that song, Do What You Like, right? Tommy Boy Records signed them to a major contract. I think it was 7-album deal for like 60,000. You know, they didn't get much money back in the day. And now they wanted them to do a full album. They wanted them to record a full album. Now, also around that time though, they ended up meeting a young 19-year-old Tupac Shakur, who was trying to get in the music industry. Now see, Adrian Gregory, right? He had signed a group called Strictly Dope, which was Tupac, Ray Love, and DJ Dizzy to his label TNT Records, on the strength of his relationship with Layla Steinberg, who was managing Tupac and the group Strictly Dope at the time, right? And Shock was supposed to make a demo for them so Adrian could try to get them a deal with a major label. But Strictly Dope, the group, ended up breaking up. And Adrian, he just kept Tupac. He just kept Tupac and signed him as a solo artist. And at the time, Tupac was about to quit doing music and go to Atlanta and just do this Black Panther thing he was about to do. It's like some kind of school he was going to go to in Atlanta or something, because things just wasn't moving fast enough for him as a rapper. And Adrian didn't want to lose Tupac because he knew he was special. He knew Tupac had something and he was special. So he asked Shock G as a favor, could he put Tupac on the road with them just to keep him focused and just to keep him out of the streets and out of trouble. And you know what? Shock agreed, and you know, he took him on the road with them. He took Tupac on the road with them. The rest is history. That's how Tupac got down with Digital Underground. He actually took Money B's brother's spot. And you know what? Shock G, man, you know, he treated Tupac like a little brother, man, and became a mentor to him, because Shock G was like 5 years older than Tupac. And Money B and Tupac was the same age. But Money B looked out for him too, for whatever he needed, because Money B's family were Black Panthers too. So he really understood Tupac. That's how Tupac looked. That's how Tupac met Tretch from Naughty by Nature, because he was a roadie for Queen Latifah. And they all toured together. And you know what else is crazy, right? Shock said he was the one, Shock said he was the one that introduced Tupac to Stretch. That's how their friendship started, because Shock knew Stretch way back from Queens with his family, his cousins and all of them. He knew Stretch and his crew. The crew was called Live Squad. And plus they was signed to Tommy Boy Records too. But anyway, so look, after that, Digital Underground was becoming so popular due to the song Do What You Like. But the second single is the one that took the world by storm, had the world in a frenzy. That's the song called Humpty Dance, which hit #1 on the Billboard Rap Singles chart and number 11 on the pop chart, and was certified double platinum. Wow, that was and look, I remember when that song first came out, everybody was doing the dance, the Humpty Hump. And you know the famous line when he said, "I once got busy in a Burger King bathroom." People knew that song word for word, man. And look, that song, man, was so big, it was nominated for a Grammy Award for Best Rap Performance by a Duo or Group. And it was nominated for Best Rap Video at the 1990 MTV Video Music Awards. But it lost to MC Hammer. You Can't Touch This. That was another big song around that time. I told you, like I said earlier, Vanilla Ice, Hammer, and Humpty changed hip-hop, crossed it over, mainstream. I'm telling you, man. And you know what's crazy? They say the Humpty Dance was inspired by the 1989 earthquake in San Francisco, which was one of the biggest earthquakes that ever hit America. Wow. Shock said in an interview that it wasn't even a real dance. And the dance really came from Money B's little brother. And Shock said all he did was he just added the wobble, throw your hands up, there's an earthquake part to it. And if you think about it, man, You know what? You think about it for a minute. It was like, yeah, you put your hands up to dance, you put your hands up, you falling back trying to keep your balance. Wow, that's crazy. And look, before the earthquake, they didn't even have a dance to the song. They just made a record called the Humpty Dance. And how the character came, now, how he came up with the whole Humpty character, Shock said the idea started with him also imitating the cartoon singing Warner Brothers Frog. Then he said he mixed a little Bootsy Collins with it, Rodney Dangerfield, Morris Day, and Slick Rick with it. And then the main thing, right, was his uncle named Tony Red, who he says who really talks like Humpty. That's crazy. Then he said they went to like a party supply store and saw a bin that was full of all types of noses, right? It was like 99 cents. It was a bunch of noses. And he found some brown Groucho Marx noses. And when he put it on and saw how funny it looked on him, that was the birth of Humpty Hump right there. That was the look. It used to trip me out too, man, because I used to be confused. Like, is Humpty just one person? Or is it two people? Because you see Shock G and then you see Humpty on the same show. But come to find out, it was Shock G's real brother who looked just like him that would wear the costume. So people used to think it was two Humpties. I don't know, man. It was just confusing back then. And you know what? In 2021, the Humpty Dance was listed at number 241 on Rolling Stone's top 500 best songs of all time. That song was big, man. It took them all over the world. And on March 20th, 1990, they released their debut album titled Sex Packets. And that went certified platinum. And look, it only took them 2 weeks to finish the whole album. Wow. That's crazy. I used to like the songs Freaks of the Industry and Sex Packets too on that album. Now, after that, right, Digital Underground, they was featured on the 1990 Grammy nominated song called We're All in the Same Game by the West Coast Rap All-Stars for the Stop the Violence movement, in which former gang leader Mike Conception put together. And that song hit #1 too. That went #1 on the US Billboard Hot Rap charts. And me personally, I thought Shock G as Humpty had the best verse, especially when the beat switched up. Man, that song was dope. I like Self-Destruction too. All them songs, Self-Destruction, All in the Same Game. Somebody gotta bring those iconic songs back and remake them or something. World needs them. Now look, also around that time, right, now Tupac, he was kind of getting impatient with Shock G because he was ready to work on his own music. I mean, he was still touring everywhere with them, dancing on the stage and everything, but he wanted Shock to produce his demo. And him and Shock used to go at it all the time. They was always fighting and arguing because, Tupac was wild, man. Always getting into trouble. He was always fighting, getting arrested and everything. Until he finally gave him a chance to jump on another song that would take the whole Digital Underground to another level. In 1991, actor Dan Aykroyd, he was directing his first movie called Nothing But Trouble, starring Demi Moore, Chevy Chase, and John Candy, right? And look, Dan Aykroyd was a big fan of Humpty and the Digital Underground. And Shock G said in an interview that Dan Aykroyd came to one of their shows and went backstage smoking a joint and asked him to be in the movie and give him a song for the soundtrack. Wow, that's crazy. And that movie and the track called Same Song, the Same Song, man, that was Tupac's debut to the world. That was his world debut right there, y'all. And that song went gold. That was crazy. That was a crazy, weird movie, though, from what I remember. I know they pulled up in a hearse or something. I think NWA, Eazy-E, they was in that movie too or something. I have to watch that again. But look, Tupac did the song, and he ended up getting his deal right after that. When Tupac was on that same song, he got his deal with Interscope Records, dropped his debut album, Tupacalypse Now, and Shock G produced 2 songs on that album. And Tupac, his career took off after that. Got the role as Bishop and Juice. He was on. But anyway, now, after the success of that song, right, same song, and the movie, Nothing But Trouble, Tommy Boy Records wanted them to put out another album because they seen how popular Digital Underground was becoming, and they wanted to capitalize off of the success of the movie, Nothing But Trouble, and the song, same song. And Shock tried to tell them they needed some more time to work on a new album because they were still touring all over the world. But Tommy Boy Records insisted they put out an album or something. And that's when they ended up releasing a little EP. You know, the EP was called This Is an EP Release because they was on the road touring so much. The label was rushing them to drop another album, so they just gave them an EP. And that ended up going certified gold though. That had the same song on there, so that little EP they released went gold. And after that, now it was time to work on a second album. And on October 15th, 1991, they released the second album titled Sons of the P, with the singles Kiss You Back, which went certified gold, and No Nose Job. Kiss You Back, man, that was my junk right there too. That was a hit. You know, on that album, Shock G, he got a chance to work with his idol though. One of his idols growing up, George Clinton, which was one of his dreams in life. He said him and George Clinton did a lot of cocaine together. But they, you know, they became real good friends, and he was just about featured on every album after that though. But they became real close though, him and George Clinton though. But that album did go certified gold also. Now, after that though, Tupac started working on his second album titled Strictly For My Niggas, and he wanted Digital Underground, well, he wanted Shock and Money B to be featured on the album. And that's when Shock G produced the beat, I Get Around. He produced the song I Get Around, which became Tupac's first big solo hit. That song hit number 5 on the US Hot R&B Hip Hop Songs chart and was certified platinum, and helped push the album to certified platinum too. That song really, you know what? That song really saved Tupac's career because when Pac finished the album, when he was finished with that album, Shock G and Money B told him he should release I Get Around as the first single, but he didn't listen. Pac didn't listen. He wanted to put out Holla If You Hear Me as the first single because, you know, Stretch, his boy, he did the beat, whatever. And then he put Keep Your Head Up as the second single, which did okay. I love that song too, Keep Your Head Up. So that was the second single. But those are the singles he chose to put out first. But the song I Get Around, it saved his career. With Interscope Records, it went platinum because, believe it or not, the first album, Tupacalypse Now, really was considered a failure in the music industry. They say it took almost 15 years to go platinum. Wow, I never knew that. Brenda's Got a Baby and all that. But they say it took 15 years to go platinum, Tupac's first album. But anyway, so look, Shock G and Money B also said about that. They said when they were shooting the video on I Get Around video shoot, right? They said Tupac was having sex with just about every girl that was in that video on set. Wow. They say Tupac was a wild boy now. Like that Poetic Justice, Janet Jackson. But anyway, look, in 1993, Shock G was featured on a remix of the Loonies hit song called I Got 5 on it, with Drew Down, E40, Richie Rich, and Spice One. That was my junk right there too. That was my junk right there. Now, that same year, on October 5th, 1993, they released their third album. Digital Underground released their third album titled The Body Hat Syndrome. But see, during that album though, they started having beef with their record label, Tommy Boy Records, because They wanted Shock to put more funny songs and use the Humpty character more on that album. Plus, they wanted them to do more songs about sex. And they made them put out the song The Return of the Crazy One as the first single, which really didn't get that much air and video play because it was just too explicit. And that made Shock mad because he just realized they don't know what they doing, the record label. He wanted to put more political type songs out, like the song they had with Tupac called What's Up With The Love. But overall, that album just didn't sell. And Tommy Boy Records, you know what they do. When you don't sell records, they drop you from the label. Tommy Boy Records dropped them from the label. That's crazy, man. But look, Boston Globe called the Body Hat Syndrome album one of 1993's best hip-hop albums. Wow. Now, after that, right, in 1995, Shock produced the song So Many Tears and F the World on Tupac's Me Against the World album, which was certified double platinum and made Tupac the first incarcerated artist to have a #1 album. In 1996, Shock G and the Loonies had a song called We Got More on the Don't Be a Menace to South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood soundtrack. And on June 4th, 1996, the same year, they released their 4th album titled Future Rhythm on their new record label. After they got dropped from Tommy Boy Records, they released this album, Future Rhythm, on a new label. And the album did hit number 113 on Billboard's 200, but that album, it ain't sell either. Shock said when he was recording that album, he had some issues going on. He was going through it with his wife, and he was just dealing with a lot of personal issues. But then that same year, on September 13th, Tupac was murdered after he was shot in a drive-by in Las Vegas. And that, it just hurt the whole Digital Underground family pretty bad. Especially Shock, because Shock said in an interview, Tupac had just told him that he wanted him to be his music director on his up-and-coming overseas tour. And Shock blamed his death on Suge Knight's influence. Shock said Afeni told him too, man, when Pac came to conscious on a hospital bed, and he came to conscious a little bit, and they started telling him like he only had one lung, he had this and that, and he said that's when Tupac was hearing all that, he couldn't live with that. He couldn't live with all that. He just closed his eyes and just let go. He just didn't want to be living like he was messed up like that. Wow, that's crazy. That's what Shock said Afeni told him. And Shock really wasn't feeling that whole East Coast versus West Coast beef at that time. All that stuff that was going on. He let it be known. He let everybody know how he felt about that whole situation in some interviews you can check out on YouTube. Now, a couple years later, on September 8th, 1998, they released their 5th album titled Who Got the Gravy on Jake Records with the help of Afeni Shakur. Because, see, they stayed close. They was real close. Shock stayed connected to Tupac's mom, Afeni Shakur. And, Afeni, she gave Shock some money to buy himself a house up in the mountains just to clear his mind. And that album, though, good features on there. It had some good Big Pun was on that album. Biz Markie came through. KRS-One was on there. But 1998 hip hop was going in a whole different direction. That was the era of Jay-Z, DMX, Lauryn Hill, and all them. So that album really didn't buzz like that or make an impact on the charts. Now, that same year, though, he did get to work with another one of his idols, and that was Prince. He produced a song titled Love Sign on his triple CD Crystal Ball album. He actually did the remix, though. It was the remix he did. It sounded pretty good, too. Sounds good. Now, in 2003, Shock G worked with rapper Murs and produced a single called Risky Business for his album titled The End of a New Beginning. And he did a little touring with him also. He went on tour with him. But see, what people don't know is Shock was struggling with drug abuse. It got real bad for him because for years he done did just about every drug you can, ecstasy, coke, acid, mushrooms, you name it. Shock did it all. And hip hop was just changing so much. He wanted to quit and retire. He really didn't want to do music anymore because the kind of music he did, he felt nobody was checking for. And he wasn't getting the money he was worth. He said just being in the studio made him depressed and become a drug addict over the years. Wow. He was in a real dark space at that time. And he ended up living with some of his friends in Los Angeles for a while to get sober. One of his security guards, I think. And once he got sober and left all the drugs alone, he made a big change in his life. Shock, he started to get his health right. He left all the bad food alone, became a vegetarian and everything. And, his friends and family convinced him to get back to the music. That's when he got back focused. And in 2004, he released his solo album called Fear of a Mixed Planet. And him and the rest of the Digital Underground went out on tour. And on May 20th, 2008, Digital Underground released their sixth and final album called 'Cause a DU Party Don't Stop. Now that album was more of a live music album, and after the album dropped, they all just decided it's time to hang it up. Been together 20 years, it's over. Shock was ready to do other things in life to start the next chapter. So let's skip to years later down the line, right? And at some point in time, Shock G relapsed. He relapsed. He went back to the drugs, y'all. And this time, he got hooked real bad. In February 2021, Shock was arrested after police responded to a disturbance call at the Sheraton Tampa Riverwalk Hotel. Now, the story goes with that incident, they say Shock was under the influence of drugs and alcohol and got into an argument with his girlfriend and some other guests too at the hotel. And they say Shock also threw some water on some guests or something. So when police arrived, his girlfriend told the police that he was high off meth and became irate and took off his clothes. And then he started running through the streets. They say he stripped down to his boxers and then walked away from the hotel. Wow. And the police found him stumbling in the streets in front of cars, and that's when they put him in custody. And instead of taking him to jail, they took Shock to the hospital to undergo substance abuse evaluation and treatment. Now, 3 weeks later, police was looking for him again, but this time for a misdemeanor battery charge against another woman who was one of his friends. Now, the story behind that incident goes, they say Shock and one of his lady friends were doing meth at a mall in the men's restroom stall together, right? And a random man, he just walked in the bathroom to use it. And Shock thought the lady that was in the stall with him doing the meth was just being too loud and making too much noise. So Shock snapped, right? And became so angry, and he ended up pushing her up against the wall in the stall and covered her nose and mouth with his hand and pulled her hair. Then he took off in the cab and left the mall. Wow. So police were called, and they did find a broken glass meth pipe in the restroom, but they couldn't find Shock. They couldn't locate him because the girl said she didn't know his address and all this stuff. And at the time he was staying with some family members, and he was staying in different hotels at times, and the women just never followed through with the case, so the case was dropped. But after that, it just got it just got worse, man, because on April 22nd, 2021, just 17 days later from that last incident, Shock G was found dead in a hotel room in Tampa, Florida. Now, the story goes, they say the manager at the hotel where Shock had been staying noticed he hadn't checked out yet. He missed his checkout time, right? So when the manager went to his room, that's when they found Shock unresponsive on the bed, and they called the medics, but when they arrived, they pronounced him dead at the scene. Sad, man. Wow. Went out like that, man. And after they did an autopsy, the medical examiner said that Shock G's death was caused by an accidental overdose of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and alcohol. Wow. That fentanyl is killing these streets, y'all. Bunch of fake stuff out here. You got to be careful, man. You know, August 21st, right? 2021 in Oakland, California, they threw a celebration for Shock, though. And the Oakland City Council has declared August 25th Digital Underground Day, which is also Shock G's birthday. That was nice of them to do that, man. That's nice of them. That's great. I'm glad the city did that for him. You know, Shock G, before his death, man, he was working on a book about his days working with Tupac. And he had another book he was working on about his wild tour stories. That book probably would have been crazy too. And you know, shout outs to young Humpty. Young Humpty is keeping Shock G's legacy alive, and you know, Shock G was a mentor to him too. You know, Shock G, he brought young Humpty into the group Digital Underground before he passed. Right after he played the Tupac movie, All Eyes on Me, he played Humpty in that movie. You know, 2021 lost a lot of great rappers, man. DMX, Black Rob, Biz Markie, Prince Markie D, Young Dolph, Kango Kid from UTF. It's a lot of people we lost. Now Shock G, man. Shock G was 57 years old. Rest in peace. Shock G, aka Humpty Hump.